So I wanted to talk a bit about my personal journey with PoTS, how I basically found out that I have it. It's been a bit of a long road, but I think I'll start from what brought me to go to my GP about certain symptoms in the summer, and that was the first time that she brought up PoTS, which I had never heard of. So I would say it kind of more recently has probably started off from around October or November of last year, 2017, that I was probably noticing symptoms more and had gone to my GP about various things. It was little things like I was noticing that if I was cooking, I was cooking a pancake and I came over really faint and had to lie down, and also from that it had a similar kind of impact when I had to doing the hoovering, a lot of chores around the house that involved standing up. I noticed I would come over really dizzy and almost faint. There were other just small little things where I had an experience on a train where I had to stand, and it was only for 10 or 15 minutes. It didn't bother me from an anxiety perspective. I've stood on trains in the past and not had an issue at all. It's a bit inconvenient, but it was only for 15 minutes, and I came over really faint and had to put myself on the floor and nearly fainted. So yeah, around kind of October, November, December time, I kind of in passing, I was seeing my GP anyway and said, you know, this has been happening, that I just suddenly will feel really dizzy. And yeah, she asked for some blood tests, checked my blood pressure sitting and standing up, which was fine. She did notice that my heart rate went up quite high when I stood up, but she thought it was probably down to stress, and I thought the same really, because it has been quite a stressful time in my life over the past year. So yeah, had blood tests done, they all came back clear, so I kind of didn't think too much of it. I think around that time as well, I also mentioned to my GP that I seem to be having an issue with excessive thirst, and what I know now is that in order to manage PoTS, you do have to have quite high fluid intake, like 3 to 4 litres of water a day, and kind of over time I noticed that I was just constantly wanting to drink water, and I would start to feel unwell if I couldn't have access to water or a drink for whatever reason. Like I was studying at the time, and I used the British Library, and there's all strict rules in there where you can't bring a drink of any kind into like the reading rooms, and I genuinely felt unwell to not be able to drink, and it was quite limited that I felt I could only do it for an hour. So I brought that up with my GP and asked, like, is there any physical reason? I was thinking of things like diabetes, and other people were, because they were seeing how much I was drinking, but she said it was probably that I had developed an anxiety about drinking enough, and that they did test for diabetes, and I was absolutely fine. So I think I tried to think to myself, yeah, it's probably anxiety, there's nothing physically going wrong, but I did still feel really unwell and faint in those times when I didn't have access to water, and I did feel that was genuine but couldn't make much sense of it. So yeah, that all kind of continued, but I just put it to the back burner of my mind because I've had so many other things going on in my life. And then it was around, it was this summer, just gone, probably around May, June time, when it started getting hotter. We had like a mini heat wave in the UK, which we all can't seem to cope with, but it must have been even worse for people with PoTS. I certainly found it difficult. Yeah, so the weather got hotter and I just started noticing things like when I went out walking, I would get a funny headache over like the side of my head, and I'd have to sit down, and it didn't make much sense because I could walk for miles usually. And I have noticed over the past few years that I have been progressively worse in the heat, whereas in the past it hasn't bothered me in that I come over quite faint, I excessively sweat. So yeah, that was happening. I was feeling quite unwell when going out, when it started to get a bit warmer. And then the main thing that started happening is that I found when I had my dinner, I would start feeling really sick, like nauseous. I think I didn't mention that as one of the symptoms, but that is a symptom of PoTS, and that actually is probably the symptom that affects me the most, in that I feel constantly like I'm going to be sick, but I'm not. Is a horrible way to feel, really. I am given like anti-sickness medication now, and that does make a difference to me in just terms of how I'm feeling mentally, I guess, in my daily life. Yeah, so I started feeling sick when I was eating meals, and towards the end of the meal really faint, and I thought it was probably my blood pressure, because it had been mentioned to me on quite a few occasions that my blood pressure seemed to be naturally low. So I just kind of put it down to that. Then in the summer it tended to get worse, but I was staying with my parents, and my stepdad has a blood pressure monitor for his own heart condition, and so they could see that I kept on going like faint after eating, and so they tried me on his blood pressure monitor, and it did seem to, my blood pressure did seem to go quite low after I'd eaten. So I thought that was what the problem was. So when at my next appointment with my GP around kind of May time, I just said I'm a bit concerned, and other people have told me to bring this up, that that there might be a problem with my blood pressure, and I explained what was happening, and I gave her the readings that we had from home, and she tested my blood pressure sitting and standing while I was in the surgery, and what it looked like was that I do have naturally low blood pressure. It's just at the bottom range of normal, but when I stood up my blood pressure increased, which is like a normal reaction, but what she was more concerned about is that my heart seemed to increase like a huge amount, and I think it went up to like 160 or something, and she could see that I was becoming dizzy from standing. So yeah, I wasn't really expecting her to take it so seriously, because I thought she would just say, oh, it's probably because you were stressed and like anxiety again, which I would have accepted because things with my mental health were in quite a bad place. Said there kind of must be something else going on, or a reason why something's happening to make your blood pressure drop. And she said, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think maybe it might be PoTS. I hadn't heard of it. She explained what it was. She said there was a chance it could be another heart condition, like atrial fibrillation, which is more serious. It's actually what my stepdad has. But she didn't think, she thought it was unlikely, and the main thing they needed to do kind of as a first line was to have me do a standard ECG, and also get blood tests and make a referral to cardiology. to look at the diagnostic process. So yeah, it was, I wasn't really expecting that, as I've said. I thought she would just kind of say, yeah, nothing to worry about, it's probably just stress again. But so I went home from that appointment and I looked up what PoTS was. She encouraged me to do that and to look at the PoTS UK website, where they suggest like certain lifestyle changes that you can make. So I think it's important to note that PoTS isn't a curable condition, unfortunately. It's more something you'll have to manage, and there's no medication that is known to help with PoTS for every single person. It's more a case of trialling medications and seeing what might improve your symptoms, but it won't completely solve the problem. So yeah, I went away and looked on the NHS website at what PoTS was, and I read it and I thought it actually felt like a huge relief. I thought that would explain so much. All these kind of strange things that have happened over the years that I hadn't been able to put down to anything. Yeah, I guess it was almost like finding the missing jigsaw puzzle piece in my life, and it made me think of all these like little signs. So yeah, I think that I have suffered from PoTS since the beginning of 2014, so for about 4 years, and I think it has got progressively worse, and so that's why it has become kind of more apparent in the last few months when the symptoms have been more severe. But the things that I had thought of like throughout since like 2014 were that over time I had difficulties with on public transport, and I couldn't really put it down to anything else, because actually I'm absolutely fine in terms of anxiety with travelling by train. What I was finding was, I mentioned earlier the issue about when I've had to stand on trains, and I thought this makes no sense because kind of a good few years ago I used to commute to London for uni, and I sometimes would have to stand the whole, like an hour's journey I had to be stood up for, and it was annoying, but physically I could manage it, and there was nothing in the context of standing up that would worry me, but I had a few experiences where I'd actually fainted from being stood up on a train. Also, I found that if I had quite a long train journey, say like over an hour or 2 hours, and so I'd been sat down for quite a long time, when I came to get up to get off the train, I would go really dizzy and actually struggled to kind of get off, and had fainted as well, or nearly fainted when that happened. And I thought it really wouldn't make much sense if it was caused by anxiety, because I would be quite keen to get off the train. There was nothing about that scenario that would have worried me. It never happened in the past. So yeah, that's what I thought of as well. I had also had experience of feeling unwell in queues. Couldn't really put that down to anxiety. I'd had kind of experiences where I'd queued up in a coffee shop and started feeling really hot and faint, and just had to abandon ship and leave, and that had happened in quite a few shops. I also fainted while in a queue in Primark once, which was very embarrassing. I guess I just didn't really put 2 and 2 together that it was to do with being in queues. The thing is that actually, in terms of anxiety, that I like queues. They're very orderly, so I didn't really understand why that would make me anxious, and it didn't seem to matter where the queue was. I just didn't seem to be able to cope with them very well. Something that I had also noticed, like over the course of 4 years, is that I became quite slow on the stairs. And I think with all of these things, it's something that you notice gradually. So, and because of that, it maybe isn't so clear, but I did sometimes think to myself, like I used to work in a school, and that originally I would be going up the stairs like 2 at a time. I'd race upstairs, whereas kind of as time has gone on in general, I really rely on the handrail, and I'm just as bad going up and down stairs, and I'm pretty slow for someone of my age and feel quite breathless. And I didn't know why. I just thought, I didn't try to think about it too much. I thought just maybe it's because of my mental health difficulties. I've got quite a lot going on in my head all the time. So yeah, that's what I put it down to. I guess also the thing with heat intolerance, that in the past I was thinking to myself, I used to horse ride, and I used to ride out in the heat for the summer and it wouldn't bother me. In the past 4 years I haven't coped very well with the heat. There's been quite a number of times where I've fainted when stood up or walking out in the heat. So overall, I've looked back at so many things and thought, wow, that all really makes sense. That would make so much sense. So I noticed a real difference in my ability to exercise, and for a bit of context, I used to compete nationally and internationally in karate and train 24 hours a week. Most of that was kind of cardio type training, so I was exceptionally fit. There was no reason why, nothing to explain why suddenly I was struggling a lot more with exercise, and kind of gradually over time I felt as though I couldn't really imagine running, or I find it quite difficult now to think of how fit I used to be and how little I can do now. Suddenly feel like there's so much more that I could say about it, but the kind of general gist is that over a 4-year period, I think I have had PoTS, and that it has got progressively worse. I don't know, it's little things that I think of, that over time I was struggling more with having a shower or a bath, and it was more from a physical perspective, because actually I love having a bath. That's something that's really good for me in terms of relaxation, and that I was finding when I got out of the bath or shower I'd come over very faint, and also that my legs would go a really funny colour, like a reddy purpley colour, or even like a dark grey, and yeah, when that first happened it really scared me so much that I also found that I was becoming quite breathless when in the bath, and I started having to bring a bottle of water in with me, and it was just little things over time, like washing my hair, like lifting your hands above your head can make PoTS symptoms worse, which all picked up, and so yeah, in many ways it was really good to feel like, oh okay, there's probably a reason for this, it's not all linked to my mental health. I think we'll leave it at that. I'm realising now there's so many things that I could say in terms of like what happened next in reaching a diagnosis and how PoTS affects my life, and I feel like I'd really want to talk about that some more, and how I came to terms with the diagnosis, because it can be quite a lot to get your head round. But in any case, I hope you've enjoyed this video or gained something for it. I hope I've been in focus, because that would be really awkward if I wasn't. And hopefully there will be some more, so like and subscribe if you're interested, and I'll put the links down below for the PoTS UK website and the NHS information about that. The PoTS UK website I've found an absolute lifesaver in some respects. Yeah, hopefully see you soon. Bye!